All right, let's jump right in. We're tackling the very last book of the Old Testament today, Malachi. Now, don't let its size fool you. This book is short, yeah, but it packs a serious punch. It's basically God's final confrontational word to Israel right before 400 years of complete silence. So let me ask you something, and be honest. Ever feel like you're just going through the motions? You know, you're checking all the boxes, you're showing up, doing what you're supposed to do, but deep down, your heart just isn't in it? It's that feeling of, I don't know, spiritual burnout, apathy. Well, believe it or not, that exact feeling, that was the crisis gripping the nation of Israel. And this was about a century after they had come back from exile in Babylon. I mean, they had done this incredible thing. They rebuilt their temple from the ground up. But all that initial excitement, that spiritual fire, it was pretty much gone. Yeah, they had totally fallen into what we'd call spiritual apathy. Outwardly, everything looked fine. You know, they were still doing the religious stuff, offering sacrifices, going to the temple. But inside, nothing. Their devotion had just fizzled out. Their hearts had grown cold, maybe even a little lazy. And that is the exact problem the prophet Malachi shows up to confront. Okay, so let's dig into Malachi's message itself, because as the final word of the Old Testament, this thing holds a really, really important spot in the whole story. So to really get a handle on this, a quick look at the timeline helps. You've got the exiles returning around 538 BC. About 20 years later, boom, the second temple is rebuilt. But then, time passes. A couple of generations go by. Then, around 450 BC, Malachi delivers his prophecy. And right after he's done, nothing. Just silence. For 400 years. No prophetic word from God at all. Kind of chilling, right? And the book itself is named after the prophet Malachi. And get this, his name is no accident. In Hebrew, Malachi literally means my messenger. How perfect is that? He was literally the messenger sent with God's last super urgent message before that long silence kicked in. Now, here's what makes this book so unique. It's not really a sermon, not in the way you might think. It's actually structured as a series of 6, well, you could call them dramatic debates or even confrontations between God and his people. And there's this really clear pattern to it. Scholars call it a disputation formula, but it's pretty simple. It goes like this. 1. God makes a statement or an accusation. 2. The people, full of attitude, push back and basically ask, oh yeah, prove it. And 3. God comes back with a powerful response, laying out all the evidence. It's like a courtroom drama. And this isn't just a one-off thing. This back and forth happens 6 times in this short book. What that does is paint this really clear, kind of sad picture of a nation that's just become cynical, argumentative, and just totally disconnected from the very God who set them apart in the first place. So we can't get into all 6 debates right now, but let's zoom in on 2 of the big ones. They'll give you a really good feel for how this all goes down. Okay, so the first dispute kicks off with God making a really simple, powerful statement. I have loved you. And the people's response? It's just dripping with doubt. They come right back at him with, how? How have you loved us? You can just hear the skepticism. They clearly felt forgotten, like God wasn't holding up his end of the bargain. So how does God answer that? He doesn't get into an emotional debate. Instead, he points them way back to their own history. He says, remember Jacob and Esau? I chose Jacob. I chose you. God's point is that his love isn't about their current feelings of neglect. It's a foundational, unbreakable promise, a covenant. It was a sovereign choice, an action he took from the very beginning. All right, let's jump to the second dispute. This time, God turns his focus on these spiritual leaders, the priests. He starts with this simple, undeniable truth. A son honors his father. You can't argue with that, right? And then he drops the hammer with this piercing question. If I am a father, where is my honor? And then God just lays out the receipts. He shows them how the priests were despising his name, not by what they said, but by what they did. They were bringing him their garbage sacrifices, the sick, blind, lame animals, the leftovers. I mean, God even says, would you give that to your governor? Of course not. So this wasn't just lazy worship, it was downright disrespectful. It was contempt. So you see, their half-hearted rituals, they weren't just poor worship. They were a public insult to God's holiness. All these actions just screamed one thing, a deep, profound indifference to the God they were supposedly serving. But here's the thing, the book doesn't just leave them in this state of condemnation. After laying out all the problems, Malachi's message takes a turn. God gives his verdict, and surprisingly, it's packed with hope and a promise of future cleansing. And this is where the book makes a really stunning pivot. God makes a promise. He says, I will send my messenger to prepare the way before me. And then, suddenly the Lord they're supposedly looking for will come to his temple. But here's the catch. His arrival is going to be like a fire. It's a day for judgment and for purification. So this figure who is coming gets a few powerful titles. He's called the Messenger of the Covenant, who's going to set up a whole new relationship with God. He's also a refiner and purifier who's going to come in like a fire and burn away all the junk. But for those who are faithful, he's the Son of Righteousness, bringing healing and joy. And all of this leads us to the very last words of the book, which are, honestly, one of the biggest cliffhangers in the whole Bible. It perfectly sets the stage for everything that comes next in the New Testament. Because after Malachi says his piece, God goes silent. The prophetic microphone, you could say, gets turned off for 400 years. 4 centuries where the people of Israel are just waiting, clinging to these last few words from Malachi. So what were those final words they were holding on to? It's this absolutely incredible prophecy. God promises, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. It's one last promise that he's not done with them, that he will send someone to prepare them. Now, if you've read the New Testament, this is probably where it all clicks into place. This is the big aha moment, because the Gospels are crystal clear about who this is. They identify John the Baptist as the fulfillment of this very prophecy. He's the one who comes in the spirit and power of Elijah to, you guessed it, prepare the way for the Lord, for Jesus. So think about it like this. The Old Testament doesn't really end with a period, a full stop. Thanks to Malachi, it ends with a comma, a pause, just hanging there, full of anticipation, leaving the entire world waiting for the one who was to come. That's the powerful, forward-looking note the Old Testament closes on. Not an ending, but an expectation.